Okay, we're set on YouTube.
Wendy, you're streaming live on YouTube, and that means that we've started. So
Wanted to wait till 58. Now we are going live with Zoom. 3,
wonderful.
2,
Greetings. Greetings, everyone. Welcome, welcome. This is Be Strong Families webinar series, Staying Strong and Positive for Ourselves and Our Children. We're here every day for at least a half an hour to talk about and keep ourselves grounded around issues of vitality and family well-being and individual well-being, and delighted to be here with you all. So as you're coming into the space, if you could open up the chat and then select number 2 from the drop-down menu. It doesn't have a number next to it actually, but it says panelists and attendees, like Luan has done, and Kara. Holy Kara, you're like 3 steps ahead of us. Hi, Luan. Hi, Kara. It's wonderful to see you here today. Hi, Angela from Eugene, Oregon. Have a small and mighty group today, I think. Hi, Tammy. Welcome. And we're going to wait for about 30 seconds before start exactly at noontime Central. It's kind of a cool day here in my neck of the woods, a little bit overcast, which is a delight compared with how warm it was last week. And we need the rain. We're in the Midwest in a drought. So who else is in the room? Who else has come in? This is almost going to be like a cafe. It's great. Okay, so Dee is here from Be Strong Family. She's supporting me technically today, and you. So welcome to everybody. Let's get started, Dee. Today, our conversation is about social vitality and becoming who we are. And this is in the context of grief, trauma, and loss. Next slide. The main way to engage is the chat, and all of you said hi, kind of know that. So but it's also really wonderful, especially when we have kind of a smaller group, to be able to raise your hand and say something. So I'll be soliciting volunteers. I hope some of you will take that challenge and talk with me. If you do that, you're going to need to Dee will unmute you, then you'll unmute yourself, and then you'll raise your hand. Dee will unmute you, you'll unmute yourself, then you'll be able to talk. Dee, what were you saying?
Oh, we already have one hand from Suzanne.
Suzanne, did you want to say something? You need to unmute yourself in order to speak.
Sorry.
No
I'm
problem.
Suzanne. I just started working with Mujeres en Acción, Mujeres Latinas en Acción.
Wonderful.
And I thought this was a cool topic.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you. Thank you for joining us. One more housekeeping item before we get started is the agreements, because whenever Be Strong Families does anything, we understand that we co-create this safe space together. So if you can agree to abide by these agreements for the next half hour, do like some of our regulars, Kara and Luan, have done, and just type "I agree" in the chat. And that'll get us started. Awesome. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Angela. Need a couple more agrees. Suzanne, maybe you could agree. Awesome. Okay, let's get started. All the questions from today come from our newest cafe resource, which is called Navigating a Grief Compass, Navigating Trauma and Loss. It's our booster pack. So you might think, like, how does becoming who I am relate to grief and the topic of grief. And I think this isn't so much about death today. A lot of times when we think about grief, we're thinking about people who have died in the process of mourning them. But grief happens in all kinds of contexts, in all kinds of, it's about letting go. It's about letting go of some things and embracing others. So let's start with our questions and see where we go from here. The first question is, whose expectations have shaped your identity for better and for worse? And then also, when have you had to break with those expectations? Whose expectations have shaped your identity for better and for worse? And when have you had to break with those expectations? For me, it's kind of a deep question because of some realizations that I've had over the past, number of years. It's easy to answer. Of course, my parents, when I was little, shaped my identity, right? And part of the process of maturation, being an adolescent, rebelling, kind of making decisions for myself. I mean, I remember, can you imagine being the mother of a college junior who tells you that she's going to go study feminist witchcraft in the San Francisco Bay Area for the summer, and that's going to be her junior independent work and senior thesis? And my parents were, I grew up Christian, and it was kind of like, whew, wow, okay, like that's what you're going to do. But I think making decisions as a young adult, for sure, and parents have a big role in shaping expectations. And Angela says, my parents, I have not met their expectations to be married and have children. I also moved across the country, what they didn't like either. Yeah, I get that. I remember living with a boyfriend when I was in the summer between, I don't know which year it was, but they were not at all in favor of that. So breaking with, in terms of, and their idea of who I was as a result of that was different than my idea of who I was as a result of that. And Kara says, thank you, Suzanne, for saying pretty rad. And Kara says, I don't know about expectations, but my husband has shaped my identity. Yeah, I was thinking that was the second place I was going to, Kara, is like in relationships, especially in and Suzanne, yes, parents certainly have, in terms of relationships. And what I realized, and I realized it a little late, that what I was doing when I would get into what in my marriage or in really any serious relationship with a man, is that I would kind of think that I needed to adapt myself to his world. And I'm attracted to people with very strong personalities and very strong opinions and very strong, kind of senses of how things should be. So I would kind of try to follow through with those expectations, and at the cost sometimes of really knowing who I was and what I wanted. It's like that, do you ever see The Runaway Bride, the old movie with Richard Gere and Julia Roberts? Anybody ever see that? Where he says, you don't even know what kind of eggs you want. you don't even know what kind of eggs you like. Like you get so focused on pleasing and on meeting other people's expectations that your identity becomes, a pleaser and one who meets other people's expectations. And you can really, I think it's very easy to fall into, I don't want to say especially as a woman, but that's how I feel it. You can fall into not even really knowing or asking yourself how you feel in that situation, or what's you in that situation. And Suzanne says, after divorce, I think my kids have shaped me too. My kids have shaped me too. Definitely. Tammy says, definitely my mom, but I also think some key teachers along the way. Mostly it was for the better, but I took on some perfectionism that has showed itself in some not so great ways. I try to balance it the best I can, but sometimes it gets the best of me. Thank you, Tammy. And Angela said, my identity has probably been most shaped by my social circle, friends and boyfriends. I've been fortunate to have many helpers light the way for change and help me to see what I could do and become. And Shazan said, society. Yeah, that's real too, right? Society's expectations of roles. And Janine said, my family and my church shaped my identity. I had to break with their expectations in late 20s when I recognized the difference between tradition, religion, and relationship. Ooh, Janine, that sounds really interesting. I wonder if you would like to talk about that a little bit, or if anybody who's put something out here in the chat would like to raise their hand and elaborate, because all of this is really juicy. Recognizing the difference between tradition, religion, and relationship. Is that relationship, do you mean relationship to people in the church, or do you mean relationship to God? And Kara says, since March when my husband passed away, I now have to find my own identity. We were together since I was 14. We came as one. Oh, wow. Kara, I'm so sorry for your loss. And that sounds really, really difficult. And also there is a liberation somewhere in there. I know I know my mom is going through some of that with her husband. Her husband, my dad, passed away, and I think part of what the conversations we're having is she took care of people for her entire life. And first it was us, well, him and us, and then, well, first it was him, then it was him and us, and then it was, because she got married very young too, at Kara, like at 17, and then after that, like in the latter part of his life, he required a lot of care. She's a nurse, and she was his full-time caretaker. And now what? You know, like now, who is she if she's not taking care of people? So I don't know if that resonates with anybody, but anybody want to raise their hand? And hugs. Yes, Kara, hugs. It's so beautiful the way we can be here with each other. Kara says, I understand your mother. Thank you, Kara. Susanna, I just realized right now that I keep saying your name or trying to, probably butchering it. I'm trying to say it how you said it when you were on, but you have your chat set to panelists only. So I'm the only one that can see what you're writing. So you have to change it so that actually Kara can see your hugs. And Janine, excellent. Janine, we would love to hear from you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, so I wanted to just expound a little bit on the comment about tradition, religion, and relationship. I think for me, growing up in a Christian household, sometimes in a Christian church as well, sometimes we are taught, we were traditionally taught things that weren't implicit or explicitly stated that are requirements for the religion. So things like, you know, a woman covering her hair or being very submissive as a woman and never saying no to your elders, or also just helping people to a fault. Sometimes those things weren't explicitly stated, but they were implicitly requirements for people, depending on what kind of religion you grew up in, or what kind of even religious household you grew up in. And so usually like the 20s are your time when you get away, you're going to college, you're discovering new things about yourself, discovering new things about your faith as an individual. And those were those times where I discovered that some of the things that I was taught as a child weren't necessarily accurate or biblical. They were just, instead of being religious requirements, they were traditions that were adopted, you know, from times past. But more so, I think for me, I kind of let go of some of the expectations that I felt based upon my own study of the religion were not necessarily right. So I figured those things were more so traditions or just aspects of a religious institution rather than something that you need relational to have that relationship with God in general. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense to me. It was ringing a lot of bells for me in terms of my spiritual journey and the different places I've been and expectations. I mean, you're talking about expectations like cultural expectations, like this is within this church, or you everything kind of gets glommed together.
Yes.
And think of it as like this is what my religion requires, and then you go outside of your particular church or your particular culture or your particular family, and you meet other people that are also Christians or also Jews or also Muslims, and they have a different way of doing things. And you say, okay, so like, okay, which part of this? Then it's like a discernment process, right? Which part of this is do I really feel is part of being a Christian in your case, and which part of it is other people's interpretation
Exactly.
of what's necessary. Yeah, I totally get it. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Fabulous. All right, so let's move on to the next question. So, who has assisted you with claiming your freedom to be who you are, to live the life you want to live? And how did that happen? And I guess, it kind of depends. Like if you've made, some people, I feel like some people have kind of a smoother journey to being who they are because of the way that they're raised and the way that they're supported in either they don't have to make such a radical shift, or they are really supported in figuring out who they are, by their parents and by their community. But some people have really tough journeys with claiming who you are. Dee says we had a hand from Alma earlier. Great. Alma, would you like to answer this question or the previous question?
Hi, everyone. It was the previous question, but I think I could answer this one. As far as like, well, can I tie down my entire answer between the first and the second one?
Of course, you can do whatever you want.
So I grew up in a very, I had a really hard upbringing. Like I had a really just challenging upbringing, and I think a lot of it was cultural, from Mexico, and like even growing up, I made choices in my life that were based like, traditionally, like culturally kind of put up with the man. So it kind of put me in a place where I was in a domestic violence situation for a long time. And I stayed because I thought that I had to, and as far as like, that was, so my upbringing was the worst. And for the better, I think it was when I started reaching out to like those resources in the community, and just the people that came into my life were people like, they made me view something healthier. Not that it was perfect, but it was healthier than what I was used to. And I wasn't raised in the faith or in the church, but I did pick up along, like starting my faith journey. And it took me a long time to find a place of congregation in church, because I didn't trust people. But now that I have a church family, they have been a great support to me that have helped me free, because, I always think of like, where does a single mom with 2 children out of marriage fit in? And for me, I fit in with Christ. So I said I'm an overqualified sinner. So for me, that's kind of my anchor and my place of peace after a long time.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that, it's really encouraging, and I'm sure your sharing is encouraging to other people too, that you can find an anchor and a place of peace after a long time, So thank you very much, Alma. Appreciate you. And Dana says through journaling and group therapy and individual counseling, and that's huge. You know, having the courage to seek help like group therapy and individual counseling. I've done that as well, and it's been huge for claiming who I am, for figuring this stuff out. And I love the journaling too, Dana. That it is the conversation with yourself, because isn't that what journaling's about? It's like starting the conversation with yourself. What do I think about this? What do I feel about this? It's fabulous. And Tony says, I'm still working on this today. People you're with try to change the way you feel and want to be. Love to hear more about that, Tanya, and other people's experiences, because I gotta say, we have a like that. Sometimes you can get to the place where it depends, you know, boundaries and deciding which people you're going to listen to and which people you're going to talk to. Friends, Angela says friends, they give you the encouragement to dream bigger and take risks. And Tammy says, my God has assisted me by giving me the courage I prayed for along the way. Very nice. And Janine's thanking Alma and saying that was a great example. We have another hand. We have a hand from Shajan. Just want to get Dana's. I wasn't until I could see that there was an issue that I was living by others' expectations, so much so that I got lost along the way. Aho, thank you, Dana, for sharing that. And thank you for also sharing. I think this is enormous what you all are sharing from the heart, and your ability to be vulnerable. It's really, really, really is helping other people, because so even if we say it or we don't say it, just knowing that other people might have trouble even seeing that they're living according to others' expectations, that in itself is a process. You know, it just is so encouraging, and I just am so grateful for you all. Suzanne, say your name again so I say it right. Dee, can you? Yeah. And you need to unmute yourself. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, you said it right, Suzanne. Yeah. I think it's weird because I grew up in a very untraditional home. My parents weren't married, but they had this like partnership dynamic that was like very awesome, to grow up in a home that you saw your parents complement each other. Nice. In ways that you don't imagine until you're probably an older adult. And then my mother passed away when I was 7, and the whole world just like fell apart. And I resented my dad, but I didn't act upon my feelings or did anything destructive. I think also because my father wasn't involved in our lives. I mean, he chose to have us. We're 7 kids. So for a long time, I felt like we held resentment towards my dad for not being like physically with us 24/7. But my dad showed up in like ways that I wish any child could have. Because my dad would wake up early, make breakfast for us. He had 2 jobs. Then he would come in the middle of the day to make like lunch for us or dinner. And then so that when we got home from school, there was like something that we could do or eat. But then his work consumed so much of his time that he barely had time for us. But then like he would take us to the park at 10 o'clock at night to have fun. You know, he would take us to the libraries on the weekends, though we wanted more time because I think kids are very egocentric. It's all about them. But then like becoming an adult and then wanting to have that like family dynamic that my parents had as a young child, and then realizing that my partner wasn't in the same boat. And then it got to be very toxic and physical, that I was like, this is not what my father like raised me to have. And just having the courage to walk away from it. I didn't invest too much time Because I felt like I identified, I think 2 years was a good time to say like, this is not what I want and this is not for me.
Yeah.
But obviously like there's society things like that make you want to stay in a bad relationship, bad marriage actually in this case. And just having that courage. And I think I spoke to my father right before I was gonna like leave my ex-husband. And my father is like, well, you know, marriage is a hard, like he still gave me like a good, I mean, I'm sure he was partly hurting, but I think he gave me a good, like level-headed advice that came from a good place, but without imposing himself or his ideas. But he just said, marriage is a hard thing to work for. But, you know, if this is not what you want, or this is not something that is gonna get better, because I had to come and tell him like that, I need to come back home, because I was a stay-home parent, and basically like I had to really start over, right?
Yeah.
So, and just being vulnerable to tell my dad that, I mean, I was pretty, like, I felt like I failed, but I think just like I couldn't think of failure. I think it was courage at the end to say like that, this is me right now.
Yeah.
And then like, these are what are things that I'm going to do for myself. And then to like following through too with my ex-husband. Then he gave me a time, and then, you know, it wasn't like a time like 6 months or anything or a year. He was just like, you're going to know when the time is. And I think right in 2011, right before Labor Day or on Labor Day, we got into a physical, and I wanted to like kind of get physical with him. And then I got up and I said, I'm done. And that was like really courageous to be like, you know, I'm not going to stoop up to your level. This is not what my father has taught me. And I'm also a very strong woman. And I don't take crap. And I'm also a single parent. And I've been in, I don't put myself out there because I feel like a lot of times I just don't have time for the bullshit. And sorry.
I get it. I get it, and I applaud your journey also, Suzanne, and resonate with the courage that it takes, and also how sometimes we're living with these messages that our parents had given us, we think, or the value society has given us, and we think we're trying to follow it, and then the peace and liberation that comes when you go to the person you think is going to be upset about it, and they say, no, it's do what you need to do. Take care of yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's very empowering.
Yeah.
That's very empowering. Recently, I'm going to share one more thing.
Okay.
Recently, my father also went through COVID. So his journey was a 5-month recovery. And I'm like, man, how did this guy is just like still killing it today? Like, I mean, yes, it was a 5-month recovery, but it just goes to show you like, crap, I come from a line of strong people. I can't, and I have to put myself first. I have to put my emotions, my well-being first above anyone else.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. In the interest of time, I have two other things I want to. Dana has her hand raised. Tanya's saying very true. We need to be able to decipher between how we want to be and how they want us to be. It's important not to lose our identity, beliefs, and values. And sometimes this is very hard when you feel you don't have your own free will. This is when we make a change in our life. So thank you, Tanya, for that one. And Tammy says, Suzanne, thanks so much for sharing that. Tanya, that resonates with me as well as the things others have shared. Living in an abusive relationship had me walking on eggshells every single day. I'd lost so much of myself and had a very difficult time seeing it and seeing that there was a way out. Once I had the space to clear my head, it all became more clear. I had been brainwashed, for lack of a better term. And I just shared, Tammy, also, like when I went and I thought I told my mom I was going to be leaving my husband, and I thought I had dreaded that conversation because we had learned that marriage was forever. And when I said it, I was so scared. I was afraid of what she would respond. This was, a long time ago. And she looked at me and she said, "Run, don't walk. I'm so happy and proud of you," which was like the exact opposite of what I thought she was going to say. I was like, "Why didn't you say something?" She said, "I didn't think it was my place." So I only share that with you because sometimes we also set up expectations in our heads for, whether we're going to be approved of or not, that don't actually end up to be the way it turns out. Dana, your hand is raised. I want to hear from you, and then we're going to need to close out.
One of the strange things that I found in the process is I have always been a very peacekeeper type personality. And what I had thought and what I guess how I set it myself up is that because I wanted to keep the peace, people in my life had taken advantage of that. My mom, it would always be bending to her will, and then my husband and bending to his will. But what I realized in the process is that I'm an extremely empathetic person. And so my need to have calm and peace is just as much for myself as it is for anybody around me. But in my quest I am a people pleaser, but not in the way that I need to make them happy. I truly enjoy bringing pleasure to other people through gifts, through cooking, through whatever it is that I do. And I really lost myself along the way because I had expectations on the person that I was trying to please. And so that has been a challenge for me as I'm recovering from that relationship and as I'm trying to become a single parent to 3 young ladies and trying to develop them to be strong, independent women, is don't lose the part of yourself that makes you truly the unique and special gift that you are, but don't do it with an expected outcome from somebody else. And so my pleasure has to be from, I'm doing this because I feel good doing this. Once I give you that gift of my time, my energy, my love, whatever, it's yours to do with that gift what you would like. But I have to release myself from expecting that it will come back to me this way, or they'll do this, or they will appreciate so much what I've done for them, and they don't even acknowledge it. I have to be okay with that I am doing that because that feeds a part of who I am. Yes. And be gracious in the giving.
Really, 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 really important, Dana. And I was just saying, like, the give to get, like, I'm giving because I want to receive this in return. That giving to get dynamic is very toxic, So it bounces back on you, right? Like if you don't
exactly
get it, it's miserable. So I love the giving for the sake of giving, but then also knowing when because sometimes if you give when you're exhausted and because you're hoping somebody else will come and give to you, it might be better to give to yourself.
That's exactly it. You have to be willing to make yourself a recipient of that too. Yeah. So I now give myself the gift of time of, I don't need to do anything for anybody for the next 1 hour. Yes. What will I do for me?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you everybody for sharing. I'm going to leave you with a question because we're out of time, but I'm going to leave you with a question instead of getting to this one. Next slide, Dave, please. So this is a really great question and we don't have time for it, but I'm hoping you'll take it with you. How do you grieve the person you've been told you are on your journey to claiming who you really are? So the acknowledgement that there might be grief involved with letting go of the person that you were told you were as you expand into being who you are. Think of this whenever there's like a very radical change. And then also, how do you grieve the people that you love? That you have expectations about how they're going to be as they claim who they really are. Like, how do we do that for our children? So thank you very much. everybody for being here. And Tammy saying no thing when I'm empty took me well into my 30s. Yeah, me in my 50s, Tammy. So what do we have coming up? Tomorrow, we're going to talk about mental, emotional vitality, gallows humor, guilty pleasures, and other distractions in the process of grief. Then Friday, we have a Grief Compass Cafe. Next week, we have some fantastic presenters. Yoli Maya, who was one of the architects of our grief deck, is back with Grief as a Superpower. And then Ruben Mabubi will be here. And this is a very challenging one. Those of you who were with me yesterday, he's got a very challenging perspective on spiritual vitality in the context of grief, trauma, and loss. I encourage everybody to come. And then Wednesday, we have Navigating Grief and Loss Post-Pandemic. And then we're going to move in July to our theme is family vitality. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Alma, you got to set your next time to panelists and attendees, because I just caught it now. I'm the only one that's seeing your props. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Next slide, Dee. The Grief Compass, Navigating Trauma and Loss, all the questions that we've been doing for the last month have come from here. If you're doing cafes, this is a great resource, and it's available for pre-order. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next time. Bye, Maria. Bye, Shazan. Have a happy hump day. Yep. So great conversation. Thank you for sharing, everybody. You make it great. You make it great. Appreciate you all. Bye-bye.